the thing that stood out to me the most, that I think every human needs to remember and hold up, is that she was talking about abuse, and she said, my compassion was not complete because it didn't include me. Mm. My compassion was not complete because it didn't include me.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth, rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share homebirth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year. From the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren of Rooted in Eden Private Contract Association,
and me, holistic doula and birthkeeper Brooke Collier of Sister Birth.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all your decisions unto the Lord.
And to reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has already called good.
Please remember, birth is not a medical event, but a natural process. We are not your care providers, and this should not be taken as medical advice. Welcome to Holy Wild Birth. This episode is a rich one, but on a very hard topic. In it, we are talking about just the process of healing from our trauma, especially sexual trauma and abuse, as we are planning for our births. And there's a couple nuggets in here for birth workers, but this is largely communicating to the mamas that are listening in. I actually am getting to introduce you to my mom, who's an amazing woman. We do a little intro in the actual body of the podcast, so I'll leave that there. But we're covering things like understanding trauma and its impact, and having self-compassion and identifying that trauma for yourself, as well as just walking into your personal experience, your healing, envisioning and planning for your birth. We cover a little bit of just recognizing your triggers and being able to communicate those needs, and how to look out for those resources and support, and addressing, the things that you need to address in your pregnancy, so that you're able to unpack your trauma in a safe space, and garner some safe relationships in this pregnancy and birth process, and just really invite Jesus into this entire healing process. So I hope that if this is something that is in your life that has affected you, that this podcast will bless you. Welcome to Holy Wild Birth. Today we have a really, I'm excited because I have an awesome guest here, but it is also a really heavy topic. And so today are talking about trauma and histories of abuse, and largely sexual abuse. The reason I'm really excited about this conversation, one, because it's so important and not talked about enough, but two, because I have my mom here. So my mom is Kathy Bryan. You say hi to our listeners.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here.
And the reason this isn't just a conversation with my mom, like, why would I have my mom here? Well, she's really an expert in this field. She runs a nonprofit organization called the Genesis Project, serving children and adults of sex trafficking, and both from an advocacy standpoint, but also mainly training internationally for the last how many years now?
Right around 13, maybe a little more.
Yeah. which Genesis Project is newer than is brand new, but you've been in the field for that long.
Right. Exactly.
And training internationally, everyone from,
medical professionals, law enforcement, FBI, Homeland Security, churches, community service providers,
youth groups, all the things. Everybody, anybody who needs to know about it, you're out there doing the work. So one, thank you. I'm so proud of you. And also she's in this work. Yes, she's an expert. She's done the work to become an expert, but she's also coming from a lived experience and as a survivor of sex trafficking herself. When she was a teenager, this is not going to be about her story today, but I just want you to know that you're hearing someone who intimately understands that type of trauma in your own body, as well as then supporting other people walking through that. So I thought she would be a perfect guest to really talk about this really big topic.
It is an enormous topic. And I'm really grateful that you're addressing it because so many people don't. And I think also when you think of trauma, it's always good when you bring something to the surface so that it starts getting awareness and discussion. But sometimes there's a point at which the pendulum swings the opposite way and all people have heard the word enough that now they don't give it the importance that it needs.
Sure.
Because it just becomes so normal. People start tossing around the word trauma all the time.
Right.
And this is such an intense thing to discuss. And if you are a survivor of any type of trauma, becoming intimately aware of how that is represented in your life, in your body, in everything is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you say that, it makes me think of just the comparison game of, well, my trauma is not that bad. So, I know somebody who has a more heinous story than mine. And it didn't happen. I was so little when that happened. So I should get over it by now. Or, just all of those kind of demeaning our own trauma and our own experiences and not giving it, honestly, the light so that it can be healed, right? Like if we're such a work of the enemy to keep us under that lie, to keep us hidden. And I just really hope that even today, that if we have some listeners that are dealing with that this will be something that God can just shine a light on and bring them into healing.
Just on that alone, I so wanted to just interrupt you because I was just like, okay. One, I want to say, and I say this all the time, I share it constantly with clients and professionals. When you said, we should never compare pain. Going back to what you said, never, because pain is pain.
Mm-hmm.
Are there differing degrees? Yes. But those degrees, instead of mine is worse than yours, it's more of a layering of trauma. Right. So you still have intense pain. You've experienced really horrible things. It's not mine was worse than yours or hers was worse than mine. It's more of how much of a layering of different kinds of traumas, maybe multiple types of abuse by multiple people, or was it all one person? So that does kind of come into it, but it's never pain versus pain. And the other thing I want to say, because it's not said enough, survivor sibling of mine said this, and it was a very long spoken word that she gave on an awards show like the Grammys or something several years ago. And the thing that stood out to me the most, that I think every human needs to remember and hold up, is that she was talking about abuse and she said, my compassion was not complete because it didn't include me. Mm. My compassion was not complete because it didn't include me. Mm. We do that so often. And when I'm mentoring or working with an individual, one of my key things that I, again, hope all of us will use as a tool for ourselves, I will say, I want you to picture or take everything that you've been through, your whole situation, and put that on somebody that you love. think of somebody you love, and if all of that happened to them, would your response be different than it is now? And invariably it is. That person has never been able to get angry for themselves or anything like that. And when I say, put that on your sister, your mom, your best friend, and they become
the child you're carrying in your womb.
Right. The child you're carrying in your womb, they become like, oh, hell no. It just awakens that, but they don't do that for themselves.
They don't have the compassion or the anger or the emotional response to protect.
Which in and of itself is a trauma response. Because when you are, especially if it's continual, ongoing, like childhood sexual abuse or domestic violence or trafficking, there's no environment in which they can react.
Sure.
A lot of times our trauma is stored in our body because during that traumatic instance, we couldn't express it.
Right.
There's not a safe place to express it. So it makes sense that we always downplay.
Right. Yeah.
So sorry for the sidebar, but
that was, that's what we're here to talk about. There's no sidebar. Yes. And man, what a profound statement that my compassion was not complete until it included me. I mean, what healing can that can bring for someone to recognize, like, wow, here I am. Most of our listeners, they're Christ followers. They're walking in that love for Jesus and they're trying to live for God, but they're not moving in compassion for themselves. Like, how is that love and compassion you have been placed in you to love on people? If you can't have it for yourself, you're not going to be able to love your neighbor as yourself. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
that whole, even that, loving your neighbor as yourself. And there's been, over the last maybe 20 or 30 years, I've heard it so many times, and maybe it went back farther than that, but that whole statement of you can't fully love someone else if you don't love yourself first. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily always agree with that.
Sure.
Because if that was true, then we wouldn't have to even say this to ourselves. My compassion was not complete because it didn't include me. Because so often, at least the survivors I know, they 95% of the time, those individuals treat other people better than they treat themselves. Sure. They love other people better than they love themselves. Yeah. In my own life, I've had to start doing to myself, okay, I woke up with 101 temperature and, symptoms, and I'm trying to push through it so I can go to work. And I have to ask myself, what would you tell your daughter to do, your friend to do, your husband to do?
Right.
Oh, those apply to me too.
Yeah.
Right. But if we don't check ourselves, we don't often do that. And I've seen we need to teach those kind of tools to people who've survived trauma.
Yeah. It's so good. That's so good. And then I think, it's a little bit of a segue, but from there, especially if it's maybe, we've talked a lot about like that compound, they've lived in trauma for a long time. They've, but what about the isolated incidents, that are, I think even in both situations, the self-identification piece, I guess, is what I'm trying to get out here, of recognizing and admitting to yourself that you do have trauma. And I mean, I guess I've seen people who have lived in trauma. It's just become their normal, so they don't recognize it as trauma, or those who've just had like an isolated event. They were, sexually assaulted at one point in their life, and they've just kind of hidden it away. And if we don't think about it, then it'll be fine. And it's just there. So how do you get from like to that place, admitting to yourself that there is trauma here and that there is some things to unpack and heal, and start moving in compassion to yourself with that first step?
I think, not to sound corny, but I think that depends on how much freedom you want to live in. Mm. For me, I would rather be unloved than unfree. Freedom is that important to me. Yeah. And I know what it's like to be unloved and to be radically loved. And I still have that same tenet. If I had to choose, I would always choose freedom over being loved. Now, that's me. Not everybody necessarily feels that way.
Sure.
And so that's why I say, what degree of freedom do you want? I want fullness of freedom, but not everybody is. They're willing to compromise in some ways to get the other things they need that are important to them.
Yeah.
And so I say that to set up this next statement, which is there are individuals who've suffered horrific trauma, but as you said, it was a single incident and their life before and after really didn't involve a ton of trauma, just maybe normal everyday human, disappointments and hurts and stuff. But so in that individual, I would say to you, what you endured still caused a lot of trauma, and there's going to be after effects of it. Addressing it or not addressing it comes back to how much freedom do you want and how much movement do you want in your life, because it's no different than if I broke my leg and didn't let it fully heal and I was okay limping the rest of my life. Sure. I can get through my life without addressing that break because I compensate in other areas. And I see that happen a lot with people who have had in their mind what they would call, not what I would call, less trauma. Right. Oh, it's not as bad, or I can just tuck it away and forget about it. Yeah, maybe mentally you can do that. You can fill your life with other things so that you are so busy that you never focus on that trauma. But you know what? Your body remembers that trauma, and your soul remembers that trauma, and your spirit remembers that trauma. And there's a memory of that trauma that's hidden away in your mind, despite all of the things you put up to block that. Luckily, if you don't have a ton, a lot of people will live a full-ish life without addressing that incident. So I feel like it's up to you.
Right. Yeah.
Conversely, when you have people who have, I was trafficked for 2.5 years as a teenager. Sex trafficking, not always, but normally means on a daily basis, it's like getting raped multiple times a day. Right. That kind of trauma is exponential. So there are things that happen to us that you can't tuck it away. Right. Maybe for a little while, there's tools that come in like dissociation and, repressed memory and all of that. But even during those things, your body still remembers. Yeah. And so I think of a survivor of significant trauma, say becoming pregnant and giving birth, if that's that individual who doesn't necessarily remember that they had childhood sexual abuse.
Right. Like if they've repressed those memories.
Right. And so they themselves don't quote unquote know yet. Right. When they get pregnant and they have to start having care that involves our sex organs and our body. And it's it could bring it to the surface. Yeah. Or they could have reactions that they don't know why they're having that reaction, which is confusing. Yeah. So
because I'm your daughter and obviously I know a lot about your story and your journey in between, when the trauma happened and when you started identifying, and we didn't talk about this. So if we need to edit it out, we can. But it just makes me think about, I know you gave birth in between those time periods. So did any of that come up for you? And what did that look like? Or even just just your identification and dealing with it was so much later. I think I was 12, 11 years old. So you had already had all three of us.
I exited in 1984. You were born in 86. Andrea was born in 89, and Matthew was born in 92. Right. And the bulk of my memories came back in 96. Okay. So you would have been about 10-ish. And
so I remember that whole period. That's my memory of that period of like 10 to 12 when you're really dealing with it and doing the work.
And then there was one pregnancy before you,
right?
In 85, I lost the baby at not quite 4 months, right at 4 months. So answering that question after we did all that talking, sorry guys. As I think back, there's not one incident in any of the pregnancies or the deliveries that I can go, oh yeah, that response was trauma. However, I think just because that's true doesn't mean it didn't affect me, because at that time I was still so much in more of a push through, people pleasing, I'm not important, just do what you have to do kind of mentality.
You had a lot of repression happening.
A lot of repression. Now I did remember outside of trafficking, unfortunately, or interestingly enough, I was raped 4 times outside of trafficking. So in those I did remember. And so I knew I had sexual abuse. Thankfully, each with the first pregnancy and yours, I had physicians that made me feel very safe.
No, that's a key there.
I felt very safe with them. Good. With the second pregnancy, we were in the military and we moved in the middle of that pregnancy. And every time I had an exam, like an appointment, it was a different provider every time. Like, even though it was the same base hospital, the doctor was different every single time.
I experienced the same with Aiden, with my oldest at the military hospital.
Yeah. So that
never saw the same provider. It's so difficult.
Not lend itself to safety, stability, and security.
Right.
But it is how it is. And then, there was a trauma with her birth because there was an error made. They wanted to move my labor along because it appeared I had stalled, which anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So they gave me Pitocin, and those of you who don't know, usually when you administer Pitocin, you put it into the IV and it goes in gradually. Well, instead, this worker, I don't know what they were, a nurse, whatever, they gave me the entire syringe of medicine at one time.
Well, it was the whole bag. It was an open bag, right?
No, it was like, she had a syringe of Pitocin that you're supposed to attach to like the tubing.
So it was the whole, it was the entire dosage that goes into the bag all at once in a syringe.
Exactly.
She treated it like a syringe like we would use in postpartum hemorrhage, but it was the medicine that goes into the IV bag.
Yeah. I have been told by multiple providers that should have caused a uterine eruption.
1,000%. That's why I wanted to clarify. I was like, it's not just one injection. No. We do that in postpartum. But
all at once, I received the totality of medication that should have been given over whatever that timeline would have been. And I can tell you that was quite horrific and painful. By the grace of God, I'm alive. And
your
stuff
is intact, and your baby came out fine.
I had a baby after that. However, that labor was hell. And I ended up giving birth in the doorway of the labor room. I was in a hospital where there was, way back in the day, you guys, there was like a labor room. And then when it was time to deliver, they would move you by gurney to the delivery room. Weird.
Sounds
so comfy.
So comfortable.
Well,
such a good flow going.
Right. And the baby came really fast, obviously, because my uterus was really working overtime. And she basically crowned before anybody knew. And I told my husband the baby was coming, and he went out and literally grabbed somebody by the neck and drug him into our room. And it was like, help my wife. And that's when they realized, oh, she's actually having the baby alone. And so then everything started happening. But She was born rapidly. It caused a collapsed lung, pneumothorax, and severe pneumonia. And she was hospitalized for 10 days because of that one error. That's the only things that happened, whereas we probably both should have died.
Right.
But again, God. And then when I had our third one, the thing that was really hard for me on that is I kept going into labor early. And so they put me on bed rest for 2.5 months. A very long time, I will say. We all, as moms and women who do way too much and are very busy, sometimes go, man, I wish I could just sit in the bed for X amount of time. No, you don't. That goes away fast. After about 3 or 4 days, you're like, I'm good. 2.5 months in bed on my left side.
What a trigger that must have been to like the loss of freedom feeling that you have.
Yeah, it was like intense.
Your need for.
Yeah. So it can come in different ways is my point. Right. It's not like, oh my God, you're touching my, private area. Could that be triggering to somebody? Oh gosh, absolutely.
Right.
But for me, the things that were, could have been triggering or cause a lot of distress weren't obvious things.
Right.
And I think that if you are a survivor of trauma and you are, starting to go to your GYN or you're in a pregnancy and you're having to have these exams and you're thinking about, okay, what about when I deliver? I don't want the trauma to be like this black cloud over such a joyous time.
Sure.
But in order to do that, I think spending some time getting to know yourself, right, if you don't already, and know what you want. And a lot of times we think we don't know what we want. Mm-hmm. And so, if that means sitting down with a piece of paper and dreaming, in an ideal world, what would I want my birth to look like? So that then you can kind of back out of that and go, well, okay, if that's what I would want my birth to look like, then what have I noticed in myself as I've lived life that could come up when I'm trying to achieve that?
Right. And we did a podcast called Rethinking Your Birth Plan that we really started talking about just like getting clarity and looking at your intentions and, in that inner work that it takes that you're talking about. So if you find yourself going, wow, I really do need to do that, I would encourage you to check out that podcast. There's lots of resources and thoughts around how to do that, what kind of questions you can start asking yourself so you can get that kind of clarity. Because I think, that really informs the type of provider you choose, the type of birth setting you choose. I think most of our listeners are going to be either, seeing a midwife, seeing even a unlicensed or unregulated midwife, or being completely unattended births. And, I think that comes up for me, a question that I often ask, especially to like the unattended birthers, is, are you doing this from a place of trauma because you can't trust people?
Yes.
Like not because you actually want to, not because you actually, like in an ideal world, if you had someone who you trusted, who you felt loved by, who you felt safe with, would you want that person to be your midwife? Or would you still want an unattended birth? Like, because you really want an unattended birth? Mm-hmm. Or are we choosing this path because of whether it be birth trauma or this other, whatever form of trauma is in their life that's kind of still ruling their thought processes and decision-making, because they're looking for what I can control it. I control everything in the room if I'm the only one in the room. So let's do that. But then they're not actually showing compassion to themselves. They're not getting what they actually desire. They're getting what they think they can have.
Are your decisions fear or shame based? Mm-hmm. Even if, I know this is midwifery, but so I may be out of bounds, but sometimes what if really what you would want is to go to a hospital and have it, but you're choosing midwifery or unattended because that feels safer. Less people are involved. You feel like you can control. But on top of that feeling of relief because you feel like you're in control, there's also the underlying fear of lack of confidence, worry that something will go wrong. I'm not doing it, whatever.
Which always ends up in a transfer situation.
Exactly.
Like
so you're going to get it whether you want it or not.
Like your body knows what you want and tends to go along with it. So then you end up seeing those like labor dystocias are, incredible amounts of prodromal labor, things start coming up at the end where you're like, maybe I do need a higher level of care. Because it's not actually about, what is the ideal way? Like, obviously we are unashamedly here birthing by design with God leading you, but, is God leading you or is fear leading you? Right. Because then you're not, fear is going to make it messy and confusing and not at all that aligned anointed birth that we talk about here. So, it's such an important thing to look at. And, a kind of a tangent, but just a little nugget quickly for the birth workers listening in. When, be aware of that, ask why do you want to have a home birth? Like, why are you here? Why are we, discussing these things? And also, I think even on some of the more extreme situations of like, a currently being abused individual or currently being sex trafficked individual, because I don't care where you live, big city, little city, sex trafficking is happening in your backyard. If there are people that live in your community,
there's trafficking.
There's trafficking, right? Like, are there people that are capable of wanting power and control and greedy? Then you have that's all you need. That's all you need. So that's a whole other topic, but just take our word for it. It is happening in your community, no matter where you live. Unless maybe you live on your own in like, there's no, 100 miles away from the next
isolation.
You're in complete isolation on a desert island. Then okay. But if you are living in a community of people, then it's there. So with that said, we need to have our eyes open for those red flags. And we can even just post like a complete list in the show notes for you on like what those red flags are. But the reason I got here in my mind was those who are in those current situations, whether it just be a domestic violence abuser that's kind of running the show or a trafficker that's kind of running the show, they're going to be looking for outside of the system providers. So they might be seeking out those unregulated midwives or those birth keepers because they want somebody to be there to care because they don't know, but they are trying to kind of stay under the radar. And so that is an avenue that those of us in the fringe birth world need to be aware of. So I would definitely check out the red flag thing. We might go into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to give that little nugget.
Absolutely. I'll share my PDF with you that I use for medical professionals for red flags, and you can share that with your listeners.
Awesome. So back kind of where we were talking about, like envisioning your birth, honoring, what your desires actually are. I also think about the triggers, right? Like knowing your triggers and expecting those, like how, like knowing our own bodies, how we respond to them, what does trigger us, how can we mitigate that? Mm-hmm. Do you want to speak a little bit on that particular topic?
Yes. And at the very beginning of that, I'm going to add in shame, which is not a trigger. However, I have yet to meet somebody who's had abuse. And if you have abuse in your history, dealing with shame is part of that. And I will say unequivocally, something that happened to you, you are not in control. That shame that you feel is not yours to carry. So in addition to the abuse you're carrying from someone else, and that you're carrying the shame that is actually supposed to be on their shoulders. So I would invite you to literally take that shame off. Picture yourself removing it from you and handing it to them, or hand it to Jesus, but it's not yours to carry, and it will keep you confined. It's like an invisible chain. Shame is in my opinion, and many of those I've mentored, shame is one of the worst things that comes from abuse.
Absolutely. I would agree.
So with that said, if you have shame you haven't dealt with, that even can be a trigger.
Sure.
And it can keep you from allowing proper provision of care.
Right.
We're talking about the most private parts of our body when we're talking about giving birth. Yeah. And so there's those exams. I've had survivors who were mid-pregnancy, and what was going on required an ultrasound, but the transvaginal, where there's the insertion of the wand, that was for this individual, that one procedure that only lasted a couple minutes was the most traumatic part of her whole birth and pregnancy experience. And so it's like understanding what parts of my body are going to be touched. What kind of touch do I like? Am I one of the people who, I don't know if something hurts, and like for me, my body still reacts to pain in such a way that it holds it without notifying me. So sometimes I'm hurting and I don't know until somebody touches that area. And I know that sounds extreme, but it's actually not that uncommon, especially for compound complex trauma survivors. Sure. So you definitely wouldn't want to be in an exam or giving birth and then somebody touches your arm and
that's the trigger, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So knowing yourself, and then also knowing what helps you when you are triggered.
Right.
Do you dissociate a lot? Are you a person who, you're still healing and you still have dissociative episodes, or so how do you deal with those? And do you function well while you're dissociated? Some people do. Some people completely focus just fine when they're dissociated. It's just a whole different kind of consciousness.
Sure.
So having your birth workers, your birthing partner, your doula, understand what your grounding techniques work for, what ones work for you, because not all the grounding techniques work for everybody.
Oh, come on. Surely they do. We can just...
If we just do A, B, C, we're done.
And it'll be all better.
All better. And then knowing too, what's your reaction to a trigger? Some people go introverted, right? They just kind of go into themselves. They isolate. They want to be alone. They cry, or dissociate.
Right.
Some people, their trigger, no matter what the instance was that caused the trigger, they're most often, for that individual, it's outbursts of anger. Right. So it goes outward. It's aggression or frustration, and it's very big and like, boom.
Right.
So knowing that would be something that you would want to tell somebody.
Right. Yeah. So what is the best ways, I guess, to convey, like, these are my responses once you've done the work to figure those out yourself, which I will say, When Survivors Give Birth, by Penny Simkin and a few other authors. The main one was Penny Simkin. There's I think it's in the appendix or in the back end. There's a really great list of like very specific instances of what you might experience in pregnancy or birth, and like what that personal significance would be for that person. Like, would this bother you? Can you put yourself there? What would come up? What is that meaning to you? And then like some strategies to begin to think about, okay, if that happened, what is my strategy? So figuring that out for yourself, but then how do we can go from there of like, okay, I know what I do. I can recognize that. I can have compassion for myself for it. Now, how do I get support and convey that to them well?
Again, individual.
Right.
I think it depends on you. Ideally, you would be able to be so safe with those individuals that you could just have this conversation like we are now.
Right.
For everybody, that's not an option. If you're like, suppose you are you're currently being victimized.
Right.
So you're not going to say that in front of the abuser. Like if
Right.
it's your husband, it's a DV situation. Let's do a sample. You're currently in a domestic violence relationship and you're going to have a baby and you have a midwife and a doula. A lot of times the husband will be there, right? The abusive spouse will be there. So you're not going to be able to say this in front of them. Oh, by the way, when I feel, you're going to have to appear like everything's fine and have this whole persona. So how,
and that's assuming you've identified.
And that's assuming you've identified, exactly. And so then in that situation, ideally, it might have to be where you write it down or you do it in a telephone call when you have a few minutes of space alone and you talk that out, but don't avoid doing it.
Sure.
Don't avoid doing it.
Yeah.
Do it. But regardless of the situation, past abuse, current abuse, figuring out, it comes back to knowing yourself, unfortunately. Like we want to just go on and not have to deal with all the things. Sometimes healing from trauma is worse than the freaking trauma itself.
Really,
it is so much hard work to heal.
It feels very much like a debridement process, right? Like
yes.
When a wound has been, improperly healed. And then it's like, okay, this scar didn't come together well. We need to debride it. And so they go in and they scrape out all the stuff. And it's like causing a new wound so that the old wound can actually come together and heal beautifully. And it's like afterwards, it was like, that was so worth it. All of the stuff that came from that is not there. But man, is it hard to do the work. But it's so worth it. It's so worth it. I also speak as a survivor of DV and sexual assault. So I just, I get it as well from a personal level. And that is, it's a hard work to do the work, but it is worth it.
But knowing yourself is really so much of the battle. And so asking yourself, what do I want them to know? How can I convey this? I want them to know all these things, but I can't picture myself saying it. Can you tell your significant other and they tell them?
Right.
Can you write it down? Make a video that they can watch. Whatever. Figure out what works for you. There's no right or wrong way.
Right.
It's just honor yourself by doing it.
Yes.
Yes. Honor yourself, honor the baby that you're bringing into the world, honor your spouse by addressing it. Right. It's like thinking ahead before you go on a car trip. What are you going to take along, right? We think ahead on so many other things in our daily lives. It's okay to think ahead on what I need emotionally and physically and support-wise when I'm going to give birth to another whole human being.
Right. It's a little bit of a big deal.
It's a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a bigger deal than society gives it.
Yeah.
We've gotten so... Sidebar, I'm sorry. We've gotten so inoculated to the wonder of birth and the hard work of birth and what it takes, all of the things that it takes of a person to be pregnant and to walk through that.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. So honor yourself and this beautiful time in your life by knowing yourself well enough and then figuring out how can I communicate what I need.
Sure.
You would not be mad at your baby for crying when they were hungry. Do not be mad at yourself for stating what you need.
Right. Because it's a need. It's not a want.
Exactly.
It is actually a need, and you can allow it to be a need in your life.
If you don't, then what's going to happen? The potential thing that can happen if you don't do this ahead of time is that you will turn something that's supposed to be beautiful and wondrous into another traumatic event.
Yeah.
We don't want to traumatize ourselves. We've already had enough trauma. Thank you. I'm out.
Right.
I'm good.
And that's not what Jesus wants for you. Like he did come to give us freedom, not just from sin, not just salvation, but from shame. Like to take that, he took that on the cross as well. And he didn't give us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and a sound mind, right? Like he is there to bring freedom. It is for freedom that we were set free. And so I think those eternal truths, we can reach onto them and hold fast that like God wants you healed. Jesus is there. He, is catching your tears and he is present when you're triggered and he's present when you're just all of it. Like he's always ever present, and leaning into him as we walk through our pregnancy, as we walk through birth and postpartum. I think that's really where we can get the most healing, right? Like he is the healer. So, yeah.
And making sure that as much as you can, the people who you're depending on during this time, as you go through the pregnancy, who your care provider is, who your doula is, who your birth partner, everybody assumes it's the spouse, but maybe your spouse really doesn't feel equipped and you would be more comfortable with somebody else. That's totally okay.
Right.
But treasuring this time and allowing it to be healing in and of itself.
Yeah. There's so much healing that can come when, the birth is something that now you can be proud of your body for. When, it's like, wow, my body did this thing. Whereas before it's felt like it's betrayed me, or before it's felt like it was this shameful vessel, this dirty, broken thing. And yet now here, there's such a opportunity for there to be redemption, but we have to do the hard work to get there.
And the truth is, any form of abuse is about power and control. Mm-hmm. And a lot of healing comes when you're walking in empowerment and when you're surrounded by people who empower you. Right. It's like it starts to make the control that was exercised over you fade. Right. And the more you become an empowered individual, choice after choice, decision after decision, situation after situation in your life, the less that control from the past abuse controls you today.
Right.
And you deserve to be an empowered individual.
Yes. I don't know if this will track with anybody. Maybe it's just my own brain, but I was sharing this analogy. Something came up in my pregnancy. I was talking to a friend about it and they were like, wow, because of your history, that must be very triggering. And honestly, I don't even remember what we were talking about at that point, but that was the lead up into that conversation. And I was like, I mean, not really, because I've healed enough that, it's kind of like when, especially we've got a lot of moms here, so I'm sure you've experienced this. If you are already a mom, or just, honestly human, right? Like we drop glass in the kitchen and all of a sudden there's shards everywhere. And when you go to clean that up, you have to be careful of like not stepping on that, and you like clean it, right? Like you do all the work. You've done the work to clean it up, and you've slept, and you've vacuumed, and you maybe wiped with a wet cloth, and you're getting all the glass up, right? But then maybe like 2 days later, you're walking through your kitchen and you're barefoot and you grab you found a shard, and it's like, it hurts you. But it's not like it was a big piece anymore, right? Like it's just such a little piece that gets your attention, and you have to take it out, and you have to if there's a bleed or whatever, you maybe need to clean it and bandage it or whatever. But like for the most part, like it's this almost minute, I didn't even see it because I've already done the work to clean it. Mm-hmm. And, I was like, at this point, most of my triggers and stuff are like that. It's just a little shard. I pulled it out. It didn't even bleed. I'm fine. And I can just move on.
Paper cut.
But it's because I've done the work of the multiple sweeps, right? The multiple cleaning and doing and working it out to make sure that mess that was caused inside of me is cleaned up. And then it might happen. I might be triggered, and that, but it doesn't like disrupt my entire life anymore. It's like, okay, deal with that, and we're moving on now.
And literally, I was thinking as you started saying all of that, disclaimer, if you're listening and you are a trauma survivor, it doesn't mean that this is going to happen to you.
Right.
Perhaps you have already done so much healing that this, any kind of preparation or potential triggers during this whole time period of pregnancy and birth is a non-issue.
Right.
Like, I don't want people to hear this and then go, oh my gosh, I've got to do a complete unadulterated internal inventory and spend all this work when you've actually already done it.
You've already done it. Right.
Trust yourself. At the end of the day, empower yourself, trust yourself, let go of shame, be compassionate to you as much or more than you are to other people. Do those things and walk in expectation of good and joyous things to happen, because that's what the Father has for you.
Yes. So good. So is there any other thoughts that you have that you would like to... So many thoughts that you would like for our listeners. I feel like this is a topic we could talk about all day long. There's so many avenues. I'm
trying to be so succinct, which is not my strong suit.
You have done well. I mean, it's not mine either.
The only thing, I was kind of jotting notes so I wasn't constantly interrupting you. And so this might be going slightly backwards.
Sure.
But as we talk about like what could happen, I don't want everybody, suppose this whole podcast does apply to you and you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm going to have to start preparing so that I have the birth I want. Fantastic. Don't overlook emotional reactions. A lot of times when people say triggers, they do think about all the physical things that could trigger you. But perhaps one of the things that you came away with was a feeling of rejection or, for example, how is that brought up in your life by other people and situations? And have you ever considered that? Right. And so working on that, because sometimes it's our emotional reactions.
Right.
And then the other thing I would say is, I lost my train of thought. That's horrible. Never happens to me ever. It happens to me all the time. I have a rabbit trail brain. Emotional reactions is where I was. So if it comes back, I'll interrupt again and tell you. But I don't remember. Just being real.
The train jumped.
The train jumped the track.
Yeah, jumped the track. That's all right. Yeah. So is there any, I guess, like I already mentioned it, When Survivors Give Birth, if this is something, it is a heavy book, especially if you're pregnant. But there might be some resources in there, but I would say go through it gently. Definitely a must read for all birth workers. But just, it is all about just understanding the healing and just the lasting effects. And like I said, there's some really great resources in there to help you kind of move through that. But it also is going to be a secular book. It's not going to include the biblical viewpoint of healing. And I definitely want to always point you back to that. And get the people around you and the resources around you that you need. If you are finding, wow, this is something that I have ignored in my life, what can I do now? And I guess, is there anything you would speak to that? Like if they're just recognizing they do have some things that they need to really look at, where would you send someone that's just now like identifying themselves?
I think if you're just identifying, depending on where you are in that, like sometimes when you are just identifying, it is a whole thing, right? And you need intense care. Or maybe it's just you're realizing and you're at the beginning of, I want to dig in and provide healing to myself. So everybody's different, just, it could be a whole thing and you need to go.
Such a spectrum.
Right.
All the things.
Right. And so it's kind of a loaded question. I would just say if you are pregnant and stuff is coming up, seek out someone who understands the topic, whichever issue you have. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for a therapist, make sure that they are knowledgeable and trained and experienced in severe trauma, especially if it's sex trafficking. That is severe, complex, compound trauma. It's a lot. I would say address it to the best of your ability. I would highly suggest you don't do deep dives while you're pregnant.
Right.
This is not when you want to go in and dig and unpack everything that's ever happened to you. In my opinion, now you do you, but honestly, that needs to, as much as it can, happen when you can give yourself so much care and time to do that.
Right.
Not necessarily when you're carrying another life in you.
And it's such a vulnerable time. I'm really glad
there's already so much coming up hormonally. Not to say that women are hormonal, but hormones do change our emotional reactions to things, and it's significant.
Yeah.
So unpacking it and going, oh, you know what? I'm going to go do a 2-week trauma intensive. I would not do that while I was pregnant.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is,
unless you are being led by Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Follow him. He knows all. The other thing I would say, which we don't talk about, I think, enough, is, especially in the Christian world, is if you are somebody who's had severe abuse and you're currently on antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety medication, don't keep that from your care provider. Please. And don't assume that they're going to tell you have to stop it, right? But a lot of times, if you have severe abuse that happened when you were a child, abuse changes our brain chemistry, which is a whole nother podcast. So, there's no shame in taking medications to help with anxiety and depression. There's nothing wrong with trusting in the Lord for that either. Or a combination of all those things.
All of those things.
But make sure your care provider knows. Don't just go off and go, oh, I'm so ashamed of this. I'm just going to not tell them and I'm just going to keep taking it. Or I'm going to stop altogether and white knuckle it, because those medications affect brain chemistry. Pregnancy affects brain chemistry. So those two need to be in tandem, not headbutting each other.
Right. And yeah, there's definitely lots of, that's a whole podcast on how we can treat those kinds of things from a holistic standpoint.
Yes.
When we can use modern medicines and honestly, the way of the Hearth Mother, going through that in a way that is first rooted in Jesus and being guided from those interventions. And so I would say use that model, use that thought process, and allow the engaged body of Christ step, allow your community to come around you and help you in that, inform you in the risks and benefits and all of the things that come along with medications in pregnancy. As you were talking, I was also just thinking, and I guess just more of that's the wrong word. Affirming, wanting to affirm exactly what you were saying about pregnancy and dealing with intense traumas in that time period. Like, we are becoming so open in birth. Like, we know that our cervix opens, but there's more that opens spiritually, emotionally, and physically. It's not just your hips and your cervix. You are literally opening in all the ways. And so sometimes this is when that stuff comes up, because you are opening. And so then it's like, whoa, I didn't know that I was dealing with that. And so that might be a part of it. And that might be your invitation to deal with what's coming up. But also, if you're so very open and very vulnerable, very suggestible, even because of that openness, which is why we protect our birth space and all those things, right? That's also why you might need to be like, not necessarily digging things up just because I think I have to, right? Like, okay, they're saying this, I have to deal with this in labor. Be gentle with yourself, follow the leading of the Lord, get wise counsel around you, share with providers if you have one that you feel safe with. Make sure you've got people around you that you feel safe with to talk about those things, so that if it's coming up and when it's coming up, they can support you well in it.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, it brings up something I teach all the time. And that is, like, if you are one of the ones in this process where you are surrounded by a safe partner, a safe doula, a safe, midwife, a caregiver, this could potentially, if you're doing all the things that Lauren teaches and Brooke teaches, if you're doing all those things, potentially, I'm not saying it will, potentially this could be one of the safest times in your life, which sounds great. And it is. However, our psyche tends to unpack trauma that's occurred to us when we get to a safe place.
Yep.
Not a safe moment, but a safe time in our lives, because they're like, whew, we don't have to be hypervigilant anymore. I don't have to expect abuse. Okay, let's start dealing with this. So if it could, it might not, but it very well could come up because you are finally safe.
Because you do have a safe husband now, because you do have someone who's listening to you in your prenatals, and because you do have a community that you've built around you that is hearing your desires and respecting your autonomy and all those things.
And because you're listening to you.
And you're listening to you, and your body's like, oh, yay, we get to deal with this now. And then all the emotional stuff. I mean, I remember when I first got remarried and the first, like pouring out stuff onto my amazing godly husband, things that were not about him at all. And it really confused me because I was like, I was responding to him the way I wished I could have responded, but was not a safe idea to respond in a wet way. So it was like protective measures when I needed to protect myself. And then when I was actually with a safe individual, I ended up hurting him emotionally, or like responding as if he was going to hurt me because he was actually safe enough to take it. And that was really hard to figure out and deal with. But once I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, I need to say something that's actually not to you. And it's just coming up, and I'm going to can I just let it out? This is not about you at all. You didn't do this. Everything that I'm about to say is not even it didn't come from you, but it's coming up because of XYZ. And then I was able to just like walk through that healing. But that one like revelation, I think really was pivotal for me in my healing journey, because I was like, oh, I'm not actually mad at my husband. I'm like, I'm not actually, I'm not actually like, he didn't do that. I remember freaking out once. He went to go get we had a little bit like minor tiff. Like it was like, I don't even remember. Like you didn't put the garbage in the trash can, like something silly. And it was not that but anyway, all he did was he was trying to like cool down, and he was taking the trash to the road, but he walked away from the house. And a lot of my triggers were abandonment, and I had been abandoned multiple times in my first marriage. And so there was this like, he's leaving me. How dare he? I got mad instead of, whereas before it was I wasn't allowed to get mad then. And so it was like the mad that old Lauren needed to be able to give herself came out. But then also was spiraling that my husband was leaving me, and here I was again. I was just all the things. And then like, oh no, he's just putting the trash in the trash can. Like that's all that's happening right now. But I will never forget like watching him. It was just this like huge revelation all in the same moment of like, I can get mad. I can, he's all the emotions. And then like Holy Spirit was coming in and being like, it's not what's happening, but this is what's happening.
Yeah. And that's where, self-awareness and checking in with ourselves helps us understand that that's, that would be normally labeled, oh my God, she's overreacting. But it's not an overreaction. It's just
delayed reaction.
It's misplaced.
Yeah.
Right. But it's finally out because it's safe to do. Mm-hmm. But it's a misplaced reaction because it's the first time it was free to be expressed.
Right. Right. Because if I had expressed those things it would have been very dangerous.
Yeah, no.
So, like there's that, like, I don't know, it's like an extremely delayed reaction, and you're being able to like, this is what I needed to get out then. And yeah. So anyways.
Yeah, it's important to remember when we have something that our culture would say is an overreaction, to when we can calm ourselves, ask the questions like, wait, what's really going on? Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, then just sit in a quiet space and close your eyes and ask the Holy Spirit to reveal it to you, because he will.
Yeah.
Like, go back to the root. Even if you have to do something like, okay, when was the last time I felt like this?
Right.
Okay. When was the time before that? Okay. When was the time before that? And you'll finally get to the root cause of those reactions. And when you heal the root cause, then you don't have the reaction anymore.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's such beauty in, especially when you do what you're talking about, and then you go, okay, Jesus, I invite you into that moment. Where were you? What was going on? And allow him to just really guide you through that. And then it's like, it can heal just the whole chain reaction of that entire emotion. And sometimes we can absolutely do that on our own. And sometimes we need somebody to help us with that. And neither one is wrong. Neither one is right. Like, just find what works for you and what is going to walk you into that freedom that Christ bought for you. All right.
Very good.
Yeah.
I hope this helps somebody.
Yeah. So before we go, I know we kind of name dropped it a little bit at the beginning. But especially it's the end of the year, the Genesis Project is your nonprofit. You are doing some amazing work there. And I just want to, garner some attention on that. And, if you are interested in, fighting trafficking, and what does that look like? What does that mean? You said it was in my community. I have no idea what you're talking about. So where can they learn more about you? Where could we even get some end of the year donations? Any of those things going on? Any campaigns happening? Go ahead and share there.
Jeez, I didn't know I was going to do this. So the Genesis Project is based in Arkansas. Currently, we are serving children and adults who've experienced sex trafficking. Here in Arkansas, we do. I also do consulting and partnership work with Shared Hope International, so I do serve some of their clients as well. So, and anybody's always welcome to reach out if they have a question or they need a referral to, services in your area. There's a lot of great orgs around the country doing good work. What we need right now, I've been in the field a long time, over a decade, 13, 14 years. This org is brand new. So we started getting work, clients the minute, like before I even officially opened, we started having clients. And so we're still raising funding. We have so many clients, I need to hire 2 advocates. So we do, if you are so led, we do need donations so that we can continue to serve clients well, instead of say, we can't take you right now, which is
incredibly hard.
Yeah. We have great relationships with our law enforcement in the state and with the CAC, and we have a MOU with DHS where we can serve kids who are in foster care who have experienced this. So we're really holistically attacking this in Arkansas. So I would say it's a good thing to partner with us, and I would love to hear from you. You can get us at thegenesisproject.life, not .com, not .org, .life. The Genesis, like in the Bible, project.life. And then more about me. There's some stuff about me on there. I don't know. KathyBryan.com. I haven't upped that website in a couple years, but there's some basic information there. Over my career I have served hundreds of survivors. I have a pretty interesting knowledge base because of that. And, we want to serve. So if you need a referral, you need more information, you need a training, I still travel and provide trainings. Just hit us up.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that this was a way that brought some freedom and some enlightenment to our listeners today. And again, you'll find some extra resources and information in the show notes. So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.